Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, hooligan shills, debt slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, useful idiots. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And I just had to talk about the so-called No Kings protest. And of course, there's tons of analysis out there, and every pundit has been talking about the so-called No Kings protest. And I think there's a lot of truth to everything they've said. And of course, the main thing is, what did it actually mean and what did it achieve? And it achieved absolutely nothing. There was no message, there was no demands, there was no real complaints per se. It was just a large gathering of people who hate Trump. And it's not like it's an unheard demographic, because for the last 10 years, all we've heard is all the liberals whining about Donald Trump. And of course, reached a fever pitch now. And there was no other message. And I would also add that there's a lot of bragging going on about how peaceful it was. Well, first of all, it was mostly elderly people, and also there was a lot of violence in the messages. There's videos of people being interviewed about how they would like to kill Nazis, meaning Republicans. There was all kinds of making fun of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There was a lot of violence implied, but the protesters themselves were just too old. And that's one of the other things that's interesting about this so-called protest. There was no urgency, there was no focus. It was just a bunch of people in costumes and dance routines and a whole plethora of signs. And even the speeches were just pretty much nonsense. Hearing people chanting, "When we fight, we win." I mean, what does that even mean? It really means nothing, and that's pretty symbolic of the entire so-called protest. And I watched a lot of the speeches too, and they were just a lot of empty rhetoric, and you could tell that the people giving the speeches were all fired up. They were in their element, but the words were meaningless. "We fight, we win" means nothing. They were Bernie Sanders. If I watched his speech, and he's still talking about income inequality. And income inequality has been growing for years and decades, and is a hallmark of societies all around the world. It has nothing to do with Trump right now. So the whole idea of bringing that up is something having to do with no kings. Then, of course, we all have the whole idea about no kings, as if Trump is some kind of king or dictator, and that's just completely preposterous. We've got a government shutdown right now, and if he was a dictator or king, he could cancel it immediately. And in fact, we've seen a bunch of legal challenges to a lot of things Trump's done in the last 8 or 9 months, and he's had to circumvent legalities and the Supreme Court and lower court judges, and he hasn't been able to act unilaterally or with impunity. And there's nothing about this situation where anybody could say that Trump was a king. And the whole focus of this, since the name is No Kings, once again has no real meaning. It's not a very good umbrella for what's going on. And we also noticed that, in Bernie Sanders' speech, for example, he's complaining about Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Ellison, and these so-called oligarchs. And it's continued to be fascinating to me that when Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk were all championing the liberal side and helped the Biden administration in censoring conservatives, they were all for him. And then once they started being more supportive of Trump, all of a sudden they're dangerous oligarchs and Nazis and hated. And Trump himself is a good example. When he was a Democrat, all the liberals loved him. They watched his TV show, and people like Hillary said he would be a great president because he couldn't be bought. And Oprah Winfrey championed him, and even all the harpies on The View were big Donald Trump supporters, and he was on their show before, and they fawned over him. And also these signs that in Bernie Sanders' speech, and also on signs, this whole idea that somehow Donald Trump and conservatives are afraid of diversity, and that's not really it at all. This whole thing with illegals and migrants, particularly criminal element and violent ones, is a very real problem. And so there's not a fear of diversity. It's a fear of the kind of diversity we're getting now, where people from other cultures are dropped into a new culture and bring their baggage with them. All we have to do is look at all the unfortunate violence in London and all over Scandinavia, where migrants have come in, and it's not about diversity. It's about rising crime rates and violence and murders and rapes, which have reached staggering proportions compared to what used to exist in places like Scandinavia. And of course, they're always talking about the Constitution, and that's one of the things that really bothers me about all these political discussions. They're always talking about the Constitution, and it just goes back and forth. But they always hold it up as this sacred document, which it is. But this whole idea that the Republicans hold the Constitution dear, the Democrats hold the Constitution dear, and whenever they're having problems, they always accuse the other side of ignoring the Constitution. A good example of that is the Democrats now complaining about Trump's unilateral military actions. But of course, when Obama started 7 wars, a lot of times he didn't go to Congress, and they were unilateral military actions. But they were fine when their guys doing it. And then the other thing is, calling this some sort of organic protest is so ridiculous. Now we find out that Soros and the Rockefeller foundations both put in upwards of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 million dollars into supporting all these 200 NGOs that help organize this protest. And in fact, there was a lot of people that were hired to more or less chaperone and take care of a lot of these elderly protesters and guide it along. And interestingly enough, too, they had a couple-hour limit. So when the protest was over, everybody was just told to go home. That's hardly organic or inspired. They had served their purpose, and it was just time to go, and there was no purpose. And overall, something like $290 million was funneled into supporting these protests, 2,600 or 2,900, I can't remember, all over the country. Some of them were more pathetic than others. And the other thing we're seeing again is, even though there was large numbers of protesters involved in a lot of major cities, we find once again that social media was using fake footage. There was one example of a protest that happened in 2017 over Trump, and that footage was shown now to show a much larger crowd than was actually there. And it just kind of is weird. The size of the crowds was adequate as it was, but the media had to try and fatten it up to look even better than it was. And so, this whole thing about it being a peaceful protest, once again, I have to reiterate it because it's a very important point. The whole idea that the liberals are bragging now that it was all peaceful, but as I pointed out earlier, the message, and when you get to the signs or people are being interviewed, they're full of anger and hate and violence. And so in that respect, a lot of Republicans are referring it to as a hate rally are absolutely accurate, because that's what it was. It was a hate rally, and the only focus of anything there was they hate Trump. They didn't have any other demands. They didn't have any other issues. Just this blanket, no kings, I hate Trump. And that's hardly a message. And like some of the other grand gestures of the Democrats over the last 10 years to try and challenge Trump, it ends up blowing up in their faces. And now, as it unfolds, it's done more damage to the Democrats than any advantage, and it hasn't really fired up the liberal base. It didn't really achieve anything. They all just got together and then went home. And that's the other aspect of this. Jimmy Dore correctly characterized it as a parade. And as per the title of my video, it was a parade of useful idiots, because these people were mostly elderly baby boomers. I didn't really see any Antifa. There was not people of color. There wasn't a whole lot of LGBT, but the crowds were so large, I'm sure there were some of those elements in there, but mostly white elderly liberals. And they had to, and that's another thing about it not being grassroots. They actually had to go on organizational websites and then register. And so they had to register to get all the information to be in the right place at the right time. And of course, what that shows us is they're basically creating a giant database of people from these protests that registered, and now they're going to be asking them for money. So now all those people at the protest, they're all fired up after going out there and doing their civic duty, and now they're going to pump some money into the DNC, which of course is badly needed by the DNC. And and then the nature of the crowd itself, a lot of elderly people. I even saw a lot of disabled people, a lot of people in these weird costumes and drum circles and dance routine people and a lot of singing and everything else. It was more of a giant social event, and I can confirm that one because when I go on Facebook, I saw a lot of my liberal friends and they were talking about, well, what are you going to wear tomorrow at the big protests? And did you make any signs? You want to get together and have some wine and make some signs, and then we'll go down there, and is Susie and Bobby going to be there? And oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be so much fun. It doesn't seem like protests should be characterized by, hey, let's all get together and meet together in the streets and have some fun. And that was one of my earlier points as well. There didn't seem to be any real anger. There didn't seem to be a crowd that was agitated or had real issues and was actually protesting in the truest sense of the word. They were just kind of there to have a good time and all get together because they all hate Trump. And so definitely a hierarchy of useful idiots. They got used. And another way it's going to backfire is, of course, Chuck Schumer was hoping this would be a big catalyst and be a dramatic event and challenge Trump, and wanted to postpone any more ideas about opening up the government until after this protest was over. And so it shows the hollow nature of this keeping the government closed by the Democrats. It shows that it's purely a political move, and now they didn't get the boost they wanted from the so-called No Kings protest. So now they're probably going to have to come to the table because they embarrassed themselves. The tactic didn't work, and now it's back to work. And another thing that clearly shows that is after the protest, Trump's approval rating actually went up. And so everything is backfiring for them. So the No Kings protests, empty, hollow, uh, white boomers, no message, no demands. It achieved nothing. No kings. All right. Now explain to me what you achieved. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.